Welcome to the Dynasty Nerds show, where today we're talking Dynasty rookie value. Where to know to find that value late in your rookie draft and even possibly in your early in your rookie draft. This is where you can build a true dynasty, is through the rookie draft. Your one opportunity to get that premier player where you don't have to give up an arm and a leg, your firstborn, or even your least favorite kid to get them. So this is your one opportunity to make your team better without losing anything. So I am Rich Dotson, one of the founders of Dynasty Nerds, here with my fellow co-founder, Matt O'Hara.
Hey, what's going on, man?
Garrett Price.
How's it going, buddy?
It's going great. And today we have a very special guest in Danny+Kelly. You can find him on Twitter at Danny+Kelly. Danny is a staff writer for The Ringer. He also writes the NFL Draft Guide for The Ringer, and he's the co-host of the Dynasty Fantasy Football Podcast. So there's no better guest we have today that's going to give you some good insight on rookies than Danny+Kelly. Danny, how are you today?
I'm doing pretty well. How are you guys all doing?
Oh, anytime we're talking rookies, it's great, right, guys?
Doing great. Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. Danny, it was pretty awesome to get to meet you at the combine, and I was blown away with some of the stuff some of the insight that you had, and I was talking with Rich. I was like, look, we got to get Danny on to talk about these rookies. My guy knows his stuff. I listen to the Dynasty podcast, which I don't listen to many fantasy football podcasts, so you should take that as a compliment. So yeah. I am genuinely excited to talk to you about these guys.
A couple of DJ Dallas stands, I think, in the house. Yeah.
Oh, here we go. Here we go. Everybody loves DJ Dallas. So we're going to here talk about some good rookie value here. Make sure you hit that like button. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. We are going to be here all the time to build you a better dynasty team, help you win as many ships as possible. So, Danny, give me a guy, and if you have maybe more than one, that didn't have that obvious landing spot that's a really good for that player's value. So somebody that lands somewhere, somebody's like, oh, I don't know about that guy, but you love him still.
So the guy that I kind of keep coming back to for that one, for that kind of category, is Leviticus Chennault. It sort of feels a little bit like people are forgetting about him. I think he's kind of like a mid to late second rounder even sometimes. So I just think his ability to kind of do so many different things in that offense, I think they're going to eventually kind of phase Leonard Fournette out. He's not going to really be a thing there anymore, even as early as the season potentially. And I think they're going to end up using him on some goal line looks and running back style plays. Obviously, I think he has the upside to be a good outside receiver as well. Paired up with DJ Chark, I think that there's just a path I see for him to get a lot of volume if he can stay healthy. I think the thing is, like, the injuries are obviously kind of like holding back his hype, holding back his stock. And that's a legitimate concern. But if this dude can stay healthy and kind of get back to what he was, not last year, but the year before that, I just think he has a lot of upside for where he's being taken right now. So he's kind of, he's a boomer bust type of guy that I've taken the swing on lately, just because I believe in that upside. I believe in his physical talent. So he's kind of one guy that comes to mind.
Yeah, he's somebody I'm going to let you go ahead and fall on a grenade for. He, on the Dynasty Nerds podcast, he's somebody I've been kind of just not building up, so to say, kind of kicking that pedestal out from under his feet, where you mentioned injuries, Danny, and that's a huge concern. And it's something that he's done consistently, has been injured. He got injured at the combine with his hamstring. And we've talked about it before. Leviticus Chennault's not even somebody where, he can play tough and physical, but even when in the games where he didn't come out because of injury, he was still like, he'd be on the sideline on the bike for a little bit, missing some time. And I'm really worried about him long-term in the NFL, withstanding that just getting beat up. And you mentioned Leonard Fournette getting phased out. I have the opposite feeling. I feel like they're going to run Leonard Fournette's wheels into the ground. I think the biggest thing is them bringing Chris Thompson into the picture will take away those 70 catches that were manufactured for him. And besides that, they're going to be like, hey, you're not coming back here next year. We're just going to run the wheels off you. Matt, what do you think of Leviticus Chennault as good value? I know you're not as big on him as either.
I mean, I think he's kind of going where he should be, in my opinion. And it's due to the same reason that you were talking about. And as far as the Chris Thompson stuff, I mean, it's only a matter of time before Chris Thompson gets injured as well. So, I mean, I wouldn't worry too much about him digging into anything that Leviticus Chennault's going to do. My biggest concern is just him staying healthy because he does play a tough brand, a very physical brand of football. So with him always kind of being nicked and bruised and on the sideline, like you mentioned, Rich, it's just, in my eyes, that's what's brought him down in drafts, and that's kind of why I think he is valued where he should be.
Danny, what do you think? Like, where do you think his ceiling is, like fantasy football wise? Because again, it's not about what you can do for your NFL team; it's about what you can do for my dynasty team. I'm trying to get as many fantasy points as possible. Where do you see that upside, Danny, for him to be? Do you see him as a high-end wide receiver 2? Do you see him as a mid-range wide receiver 2? Where do you see Leviticus Chennault from a fantasy aspect?
Yeah, I mean, I think just in my mind, I'd probably place him in that high-end wide receiver 2 range. Like, I think he'd have a hard time getting the volume, especially playing with a quarterback like Minshew. I don't know what their quarterback situation is going to be long-term, but there's question marks around the quarterback. There's question marks because he might end up being kind of the de facto number 2 behind DJ Chark. So maybe he doesn't have that wide receiver 1 type volume. But I do think the other thing that keep in mind is, like I was saying earlier, like the rushing production is certainly potential to be there. The way that they can use him in certain scenarios near the goal line, I think could potentially like boost his value a little bit. But yeah, I would definitely hear you about the injury thing. I don't know. For some reason, I just like the injuries don't scare me quite as much. Maybe that's just kind of the way I draft. I'm looking for that value that people are worried about a player for that specific reason. I don't know if I necessarily believe in the whole injury prone thing. Like, I think it's just kind of bad luck a lot of the time. So I don't know. Maybe I'm just like willing to take that risk a little bit more, but I definitely hear you on that. That's the reason he is where he is.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, you got to take a risk.
They spent a high second-round draft pick on him, so there's a lot of capital that they're dumping into this guy. So, as far as manufactured touches, they're going to be trying to get him involved. So I totally get you there.
Yeah.
And it just boils down to your risk. How much risk you're willing to take on.
It depends on your team too. I think like where your team is situated. Like if you're rebuilding, like he's not necessarily the high floor guy that I'm going to go for. If you're trying to like get some solid foundational pieces in there in the second round, if like late second round. But if you're a team that has a pretty stacked like position group already, like I generally will go for like a really high upside guy that you could hit the home run with this guy.
Yeah, push you over the top.
Like based on his, I believe his sophomore numbers, like analytically, he's like really, really strong, breakout age, all that stuff. Athletically, we don't really know. So that's another like X factor variable. Like he got hurt at the combine. We don't actually know like his testing numbers. He could be off the charts athletic. Daniel Jeremiah said he's arguably the best athlete in the class. So I don't know. I just gravitate towards that kind of thing, like in that area, like go for the home run, especially if you're on a team, if you have a team that is kind of good foundation already. Like to me, that's just kind of enticing, but I definitely understand all the concerns about him.
Yeah, they say he's a second-round pick right now is where he's going, the second round, anywhere from the high to mid-second round of your rookie draft, and that's where you see the value. For me, I know he has to shoot for the moon, but if I'm shooting for the moon, I'm looking elsewhere personally because, again, you mentioned already some question marks about him, the injuries. His route running is nothing to really just write your mom home about and say, this guy is absolutely fantastic, Mom. You got to check out his routes. It's not there either. His hands are okay. I never saw him do anything overly spectacular there at Colorado, but it's also like not even just him. Like you said, the path is there, but the quarterback situation, it's a question mark. We don't know who the quarterback will be in 2020 or beyond. The running situation, Leonard Fournette, we know, is clearly most likely going to be gone after this season, no matter what. I don't think he'd resign there if they wanted him to resign there. They have DJ Chark. They bring in a tight end. They have Tyler Eifert. They have Josh Oliver as a weapon. They have D.D. Westbrook, but there's no the closest thing they have to a superstar is, honestly, you can argue, is DJ Chark. That's the closest thing they have there. So that's a lot of question marks for me. Garrett, what you want to chime in real quick about anything about Laviska, or are you good?
We can move on to another player. I'm fairly neutral on it. We've talked about it on some other shows. I definitely see the upside. And at that point in the late second round with the other players that are going around that mark, I think the upside is worth it at that point. If it's going to be down to, him or Antonio Gibson or, I'm trying to think of some of the other wide receivers, Chase Claypool, some of those guys. Like, I would rather take the risk on the upside there. It's when it starts to sneak into like the T. Higgins, Michael Pittman range that I'm like, nah, I'm good. I'd rather T. I'd rather Pittman. I'd rather those guys.
Clearly, definitely. And you mentioned a guy that's a guy I've taken over him every draft. When I look at when I'm balancing those two, it's Antonio Gibson and Leviticus Chennault. Those are the two I'm looking at. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to take that 4.38 speed and that big former receiver running back and just hope he's used like Percy Harvin there in Washington. Danny, do you have another guy out there that you want to talk about?
Well, this isn't necessarily a guy who I'm not necessarily going to die on this hill, but I think he's a very interesting player, and that's Van Jefferson for the Rams. I think he's such a, I guess, like controversial prospect because he's terrible analytically. He's old. He never had good production. He's just kind of like not a guy that typically you target, but at the same time, he's a second-round pick. Like he went ahead of Denzel Mims. And he goes to a passing game that has been prolific in the past. A lot of people had comped him. Cooper Kupp was my comp to him. So it makes sense that he would go to a Sean McVay team where he really values that route running, that ability to separate, all that stuff. That's exactly what that Van Jefferson brings. Cooper Kupp is a free agent, I believe, after this year. So there's a clear path where he could be like potentially a number one guy. Like you don't take a second round pick without that thought that like he could turn into like a big time producer for you. And so I just think he's very fascinating because you can get him in the third round and, analytics would definitely point you like away from this guy for sure. And I understand that, but at the same time, he's another guy that's like, just, man, it's tempting right there because the other guys around him are just either like running back by committee at best type guys or I don't know. I just think so. He's another very, very interesting prospect. He's not someone I'm going to die on that hill for, but I think he's very kind of just like a very scintillating pick right there in that range.
And if you listen to the Dynasty Nerds podcast, our rookie mock drafts, our rookie breakdowns, we've been talking about Van Jefferson now for months, where not only before the NFL draft, we're like, we don't know where he's going to go. We did not think he was going to go high in the second round, but like he's going to end up being really good value and an intriguing prospect. And like you mentioned, Danny, the fact that he went in the second round ahead of Denzel Mims, and I love that Cooper Kupp comp. I really do because they're both a little bit older coming out. They both won with their route running in their hands, and they're very similar prospects. And I love Van Jefferson in the value. If this shows when we're talking about where's good value, we're going to talk about a couple of rounds of value. Van Jefferson in the third round, you're not going to find any better value of any other player in your rookie draft. Absolutely not.
And obviously, he's the son of a former NFL wide receiver. His dad is a wide receiver coach right now in the NFL. So he's been getting coached up, from a young age. He's very polished. I mean, obviously, I think he's 23 right now. So he is a bit older, like you guys had mentioned. But like you said, Rich, Cooper Kupp was, I think, 24 when he came into the league. So I think Cooper's be 28 this year. So he's kind of surprisingly old. And Van Jefferson might be able to just swoop right in there, take over the very similar situation there. And even if they keep Cooper Kupp, this is an offense that it's been able to support three guys in the past and have them all be fantasy relevant. Maybe not all on the same week, but like you can get some pretty solid production right away from him, I believe. So I like Van Jefferson. He was one of the players I was going to mention. So I'm glad that you brought him up.
Danny, let's talk about a guy possibly here that may not produce early on, but this is Dynasty, so we're not looking for somebody to help me right away as well. So say you are a rebuild team and you have a high pick. What's a player that you like down the road? So he's not going to give you a lot early, but maybe starting in 2021, he's going to start giving you a little something for that Dynasty team right when you're ready to turn that corner.
Yeah, so I guess like the easy answer for this one is CeeDee Lamb, just because, he lands with a team that has a couple of studs already, receivers and Gallup and Amari Cooper. I still think he could be like a guy in year one, but like longer term, I think he has potential to be that number one. There's been a lot of talk about how the Cowboys can get out of Amari Cooper's contract in a couple of years. So he would be maybe, I guess, just like one guy that really stands out early on in the first round. And then the other guy, I guess, that comes to mind is Michael Pittman, I think, or Higgins. Like Higgins and Pittman to me are like early second round type players who might be, solid contributors in year one. And then they have that like wide receiver one upside in a couple seasons where, you're looking back on it and it's like Kenny Galladay or something like that in a couple seasons. And so those are definitely guys that I'll be targeting like in the early second round. I really love both of those. Like landing spots, great. Higgins has to sit behind AJ Green, a couple of really good players, but he's getting paired with what I think he's going to be an elite quarterback in Cincinnati. And then Pittman, with the quarterback situation there, it's more uncertain going forward. But Phillip Rivers has a long storied history of like throwing it deep, throwing it up to his big receivers. And so I think there's kind of potential for a really strong connection there if Phillip Rivers ends up being there for a couple seasons. So those guys stand out.
Yeah, and you bring up Michael Pittman, so I just want to go right into our next kind of topic here of where let's talk about some value here. Good value, feel like, because we've all done a lot of actual rookie mock drafts at this point. So let's talk about some good value in the first round, maybe some second round value in third round. And for me, right out the gate, you mentioned Michael Pittman at the high second round. I've come to the conclusion that Michael Pittman will not get past me in the first round if I have 112 under any circumstance whatsoever. It's one of those situations when I got done watching all the tape, Danny, and if you enjoy watching rookie tape, check out dynastynerds.com, our Dynasty Nerds film room. Danny uses it. We use it. There's not a better place to watch rookies. But when it was all said and done, because we had a lot of rookie receivers to watch this year, and Michael Pittman was one of the last rookies I actually scouted in depth. And I said in the Dynasty Nerds podcast when it was done, I was like, man, I just felt through this whole process. I think the biggest thing I was wrong in was being too low on Michael Pittman, because this guy, to me, is almost just a more physical T. Higgins, essentially. Yeah. So with that landing spot, seeing how fired up the Colts were with their Colts.com player analysis to get this guy, you mentioned it doesn't matter who the quarterback is, because he has that true number one profile. So those kind of guys excel no matter who the quarterback is, because they're going to be force-fed the ball. Anytime anybody's going to be force-fed the ball, I'm going to get more fantasy football points for my dynasty team. So this is fantastic news. T.Y. Hilton, he's no spring chicken. Paris Hilton, he's a really good compliment to offset a guy like Michael
Paris Hilton.
Jack Doyle down the road's not too bad either.
You mean Paris Campbell, right?
Paris
Campbell or Paris Hilton would probably look great out there, but you know.
I know, Garrett, I know who would look better for sure.
Who's that?
So for me, Michael Pittman's my guy. Garrett, give me a guy in the first round that of all these drafts you've done so far that you feel is just really good value for where they're going. Obviously not a top-end guy.
Yeah. Well, real quick on the Pittman thing, I thought it was really interesting on that same episode you were talking about. The guy they comped him to, the Colts comped him to, was Vincent Jackson. And that was the main wide receiver for Phillip Rivers for years. And so, you know, that was kind of a cool comparison to see when they were like, oh, it's Vincent Jackson. I was like, oh, I love that. That'd be great. Moving back to your first question there of what player in the first round do I find myself going after? And it's basically whatever running back of those top four are left, I'm good with. I'm not going to be picky. I'm not going to argue about this one should be here, this one should be there. All four guys are fantastic. Obviously, I think Dobbins, Taylor, and CEH have incredible landing spots. Swift, maybe not so much, but the talent is absolutely there. We know that Stafford actually really does like to throw it to the running back, even though perception might not tell us that. The numbers tell us that he absolutely does like to do that. So I'm not going to be picky, especially in super flex formats. I've seen one of those running backs, it's almost always either Swift or Dobbins, fall to the 8, 9, 10 range in some of those drafts, and I'm swooping up that value all day long.
Yeah, he's the number one. I thought about using him too besides Pittman. Like Swift went from the 1-1 forever all the way down to 1-4 is almost as high. And like you said, there's this perception that Detroit doesn't throw the ball. But meanwhile, Theo Riddick was a flex option running back just 2 years ago. And that's Theo Riddick. And DeAndre Swift is like Mount Everest to the bunny hill you jump over with your bike. You know what I mean? It's like it's night and day. Matt, give us a guy in the first round that you've seen go that you feel is really good value.
I mean, we already mentioned a few of them, the CeeDee Lambs, but a guy like Jerry Jeudy, who obviously everyone has a really high tape grade on, is sliding all the way back. I mean, I've only done super draft or super flex drafts, so I'm seeing him going the late first round, which is just crazy value in my eyes to get who used to be and was perceived for a long time to be the wide receiver one in this draft class. And now he's going in the back half, almost the back 3 or 4 picks of the first round in Superflex drafts. So that's just crazy value in my eyes.
And people falling out for Jerry Jeudy for some reason. Jalen Reagor getting that bump there helps him out. And maybe because Cortland Sutton's there. No, there's so many weapons, like how they're going to feed a ball. But when you have a route runner as good as Jerry Jeudy, every time you get separation, you're going to get the ball thrown to you. And again, in PPR leagues, this is somebody, I don't need you to have 1,600 yards. If you get 90 receptions, I'll take 1,200, 1,100 yards. And Let Cortland have the touchdowns if he wants. I'll take what I can get. I'll take 5. You know what I mean? And that's still going to be low-end wide receiver 1, the high-end wide receiver 2 numbers. And those are kind of players that help you win championships. Like you said, Matt, that you can get at the back of the first round. Danny, who's somebody that you like in the first round that's going just maybe where their landing spot's going right now that you think is really good value?
I think Justin Jefferson's kind of fallen off a little bit in terms of, I guess, the hype or whatever that we were seeing, like, pre-draft or whatever. It is a question mark whether he can operate on the outside. I think he can. He did the year before last, and so he's got experience there. Per PFF, his yards per route run on the outside wasn't all that different than it was in the slot, and so there's evidence to indicate that he could potentially operate there and do just fine. So you're getting him in a what has been a good offense, a good passing offense. Kirk Cousins is a underratedly good quarterback every year. It seems like people still just for whatever reason hate him.
Rich.
Yeah, but I don't know. I just think he's another guy that he's falling into I'd say probably like late first round, and he has a direct path right away to a lot of volume. And Thielen's not getting any younger, so he has the path to be a number 1 within a couple of seasons. And so I'm a big Justin Jefferson fan. I just think he's a good player who's a good route runner, has the quickness in the short area. He can play in the slot, obviously. And he's really, really tough at the catch point. So there's just a lot of things to like about him. It just seems like a lot of people are more excited about the Raiders, even like Keyshawn Vaughn, the guys like that. Like, I don't know. I would take Jefferson over probably both those guys. It'd be close to the Rager.
Well, if you listen to Dynasty Nerds podcast, Danny, you would know that there's no bigger Justin Jefferson fan in the world than our friend Matt here. You said the name Justin Jefferson. If Matt would have stood up quickly, he could have been able to poke a small child in the eye without his hand. Because
I just didn't want to be the one
about Justin Jefferson.
I didn't want to be the one to bring him up, so I'm really happy.
I was
Danny,
shocked, actually. I thought for sure when we were talking about late round value, you're going to be like, Justin Jefferson, the greatest player of all time.
I felt like I had done that so many times. I was like, I have to move on. I have to choose somebody else. So Danny,
and then
you
Danny
do not know how much that warmed my heart when you brought Justin Jefferson up.
Danny, Justin Jefferson is Matt's number 2 overall receiver in this draft class.
Nice.
Love him.
Nice.
So he loves them. Okay. So let's get into, okay. So the first round this year, guys, it's easy. If you have a 2021 first and you can't mess it up. The only thing that can mess it up is the player himself. So maybe Cam Akers bust out, or Jalen Reagor doesn't, come out to be the receiver he wanted to be in Philadelphia, or that's it. Everybody else I feel like is a guaranteed to be good. But I mean, you can't miss this year. There's no back end drop off that you're going to have to worry about. So let's get into the second round, because you can make the case here now, guys. All these guys at the top end of the second round, we're not going to talk about those guys because, again, those are first-round picks in any other draft. Well, what are some guys that have been going later in the second round that you feel are pretty good value? Danny, I'll lead off with you. You give us a guy here that's going in the second round, mid-second round that you think is just really good value in this year's draft class.
I'm a big Ayuk guy, actually. And he's similar in some ways to the Van Jefferson discussion because he's analytically not as good. He's a late bloomer, former JUCO transfer. He's a little bit raw as a route runner. He couldn't get a lot of snaps or targets, I guess, in front of N'Keal Harry last year. But I just think the landing spot is awesome. I think he has the opportunity to do what he does best, and that is like pick up yards after the catch. He's very much reminds me of Deebo Samuel stylistically. He's more explosive, I think, than Deebo is, though. And I just trust that Shanahan's going to get him involved. It sounds like Shanahan's absolutely in love with Ayuk. He just loves like his intensity, the way that he plays, the way he wants to be great. It's almost like he was subtweeting Dante Pettis a little bit in like all the press conferences after the draft, just singing his praises. And he was like, he even said, he was like, and I promise you, I'm going to scheme up ways to get him the ball. I'm going to scheme up ways for him to be as great as he's going to be. I'm paraphrasing what he said, but it was basically like, I'm going to get him the ball in space and let him do his thing. We've seen what he's done with Deebo. We've seen what he's done with Kittle. Like, you get these elite athletes who can run after the catch, who are really elusive, and they're a huge, huge part of the offense. Now, I think he is probably around where he should be going just because he's playing third fiddle to Deebo and Kittle, and they're a run-first offense. But that being said, I think he's got, a ton of upside. I just think he's a really, really good player. I really liked watching his tape. Like there was a lot of, I guess, controversy over him kind of like as we came into the draft, but I just think he is electric with the ball in his hand. So,
and he's got those long arms as well, being 5'11", 80-inch wingspan. I mean, he can get it. Like you said, he's a burner compliment to Debo, and I loved Debo last year. He was one of my top receivers. And I said my dream spot was for San Francisco, and he landed there. And you mentioned, too, like the situation where they're going to scheme him up. I read a report just the other day saying that the 49ers were prepared to take him at 13 overall, even if they couldn't move out for Ayuk. So this is a weird situation where, of course it's great value. How many guys get drafted in the first round of the NFL draft at a skill position that don't go in the first round of dynasty rookie drafts? Well, we just found one. And not only top of that, it's not like Brandon Ayuk went to the Jets. He went to the 49ers with one of the best head coaches, scheme offensive coordinators in the game with Kyle Shanahan. There's nobody better in the game that's to help you scheme players, him, Sean Payton, to put their players in the best position to better the team. And not only that, again, this is dynasty fantasy football. Kyle Shanahan puts his players in the position to score fantasy football points. And that's where Ayuk is too. I love that pick, Danny. Matt, give us a guy here in the second round that you've been seeing go there that you feel some pretty good value.
So middle to late of the second round. I've loved the Bryan Edwards pick, man. So this is a guy that great route runner, very physical. He's already like him matched up with Henry Ruggs. They're going to be a very, very dynamic, two-person wide receiver core there because they do everything completely opposite. Henry Ruggs is the small, super fast guy that's going to burn, and he's not a very physical guy though. And on the flip side, Bryan Edwards is a very refined route runner. I like him at the catch point. He's strong, like Garrett's saying. He's very strong after the catch as well. So, obviously he was a third-round draft pick in the NFL, but had it not been for the foot injury pre-draft, I think he would have definitely climbed up into that second-round range for sure. So he's a very good value here in your dynasty drafts going in the middle to late second round.
Yeah, like you mentioned, he's a very good compliment to Henry Ruggs. And what I love about the Raiders did there is they're both very sure-handed. Henry Ruggs and Bryan Edwards do not drop footballs. And they can both run routes. And like you said, they complement it well, where you can actually envision where you can see how it plays out, where Bryan Edwards is the better overall fantasy player because he's the one catching all the footballs there in Las Vegas. Garrett, give us a guy in the second round that you feel some pretty good value.
It's tough to go wrong with really any of these receivers right now, but I'm going to specifically pick Denzel Mims. Denzel Mims ends up landing what at first seems like a bad landing spot. Oh, you got Gase. Dang it. Oh, no. That's everybody's worst nightmare. But when we dig a little bit deeper, now you get to pair a young wide receiver that is uber athletic. I mean, he was killing the 40 time. I mean, everything. He looked fantastic. Going back and watching his tape, that was all there as well. So, it really matched up well. He fell a little bit further than I would have thought, and I think that's mostly just because there was so much talent to be had. I think in most years he's probably getting taken at the end of the first, beginning of the second round in most NFL drafts, but he fell a little bit. But the biggest thing is there's really no competition there right now. I mean, his biggest competition is Pittman, who's had like two halves of an okay season, the second half of Cleveland, and then last year the second half of his time in Tampa Bay. Like, we know there's some talent there, but long term, like that's not their franchise receiver. He has an opportunity to come in, become that franchise level receiver. Is there some risk there? Absolutely, but his upside is enormous.
Yeah, big, physical, make the electric catch, good, explosive, fast, 4.3. There's not much to like about Denzel Mims. Not much not to like about Denzel Mims. My favorite late round guy in the second round this year is Anthony McFarland, running back out of Maryland. He's just somebody where not only do I'm intrigued by his skill set and his explosiveness to get outside and able to catch the football, and where he slipped. I think we're all going to benefit from that 2019 season where he had to deal with that high ankle sprain instead of the 2018 tape, which was electric. There's a clear path for him not to only share carries in Pittsburgh with James Conner, but James Conner's on the last year of his deal. This is a situation where I easily see Pittsburgh moving on. James Conner's been banged up a lot as well. He's got a great feel-good story, but they're going to be looking for somebody to hand the rock to. James Conner is not the kind of guy that you give a lucrative second contract to. He's just not. He had to come out this year and just blow the doors off the NFL. And I don't even think he's going to be in position to do that. I think McFarland's going to get some carries. We've seen this where if they give Benny Snell or Jalen Samuels, make him the guy, like he's fantasy relevant in Pittsburgh. Mike Tomlin's scheme is fantasy football running back friendly. And I think Anthony McFarland has a clear path to 2021 to being that guy and getting those carries in Pittsburgh. And if you're that guy in Pittsburgh who can catch the football and you're explosive on the outside with the weapons they have and the receiver ability, that you're talking like floor of a running back too. And that's a very, very needy position to have. And running back 2 is the kind of player that can literally help you win that Dynasty Fantasy Football Championship. This is somebody who's going to the back end of the second round. I've seen him even go in the third round that has that path to this year, but even greater so in 2021. So let's wrap this show up, guys, here with the third round. We each give a guy here that we've been seeing go in the third round that we like, that we feel is some pretty good value. Danny, give us a guy in the third round that you say, hey, this is a dynasty prospect that could potentially be helping your roster and down the road win some championships.
Well, let's see here. I know who Garrett is going to say, so I don't want to steal his.
Go ahead, because I talk about him too much. The Dynasty Nerd faithful will be happy to hear someone else talk about him.
Yes, let's get a different perspective on this. We've actually had this player on the show as well, so it's great.
Oh, nice. Okay, so I was going to say DJ Dallas for the Seahawks. He was one of my kind of sleepers going into the draft. I didn't really know where he was going to go. I figured mid rounds, but actually fourth round was a little bit higher than I expected. So that was great. Like good landing spot. Like the Seahawks love to run the ball. Chris Carson is going into the final of his contract. Rashad Penny has not been able to stay healthy. And when he has been healthy, there's only been small flashes of like anything close to like first round, like talent. Like I will say, like before he tore his ACL last season, Penny looked really, really good for like 4 or 5 games there. And I was like, okay, I finally see what the Seahawks saw. But other than that, I just haven't seen it. And he has been playing backup. So I really do think like, if you want to take a flyer on a guy in the third round, Dallas is the type of guy to do it because he could find himself in a starting role like 2 years down the line, even closer to that, maybe even like next year, early on in the season, because both Carson and Penny are right now rehabbing major injuries. So like both of those guys might not be ready. I do think the Seahawks said, I think Pete Carroll said that Carson was on track to start the season, but I don't know. I'm a big Carson fan, but he's had fumble issues. He's had injury issues. And again,
last year of his deal.
Yep. Last year of his deal. So like, they're not necessarily tied into him long-term. They probably won't re-sign him to a big contract. You never really know because Pete Carroll loves the dude, but it wouldn't be the smart thing to do. So maybe that's what they'll do. Yeah, I think Dallas is super underrated. He's really good in the passing game. He's really, really tough runner, breaks tackles, like good contact balance. He's a really good returner. He's going to be a returner for the Seahawks, which potentially adds value. And he's just like the type of dude, and you guys talk to him, so you probably know, like every time I mention him on my Twitter, like Miami fans come out of the woodwork talking about how much they love this dude. Like he was the ultimate teammate type guy. Like everyone loves him. I can see the Seahawks falling in love with this guy. So anyways, he's kind of like a third round flyer with the solid floor to be like a passing down back, but I think he also could someday end up being the starter for the Seahawks.
More in my heart.
Yeah, and just an all around good dude, man. Real humble. So we had him on a show, and he got to talk to Garrett and the boys for about an hour, and just came away completely impressed with him. Matt, give us a guy in the third round that you feel has been some pretty good value that you want to try and get some shares of on your rosters.
So yeah, in the third round, it's obviously everything's starting to dwindle a little bit as far as top end talent at a lot of positions. So that's when I'm gonna like start striking on some of these tight ends, and the guy that I like most is Cole Kmet. High second round draft pick. He's going to a team that obviously needs a tight end pretty bad. They have Jimmy Graham there now for like the next couple of years, kind of while Cole Kmet is acclimating himself to the NFL. And I think, a few years down the road, he's going to be one of those tight end. He's going to be in the conversation for a tight end one in the league. So he's got definitely the skills in my eyes to do that. So he's a guy.
He has some Goddard. He has Goddard vibes to me.
Yeah, I could see a little bit of that. he's sneaky athletic, and he's a guy that was playing baseball and football in college, and now he's going to be able to solely focus on that and train for that as well. And it's not like his times and stuff were bad to begin with, but I think he has a little bit more athletically in him once he gets to the NFL and is training for that full time. So
yeah, a little unknown fact that Cole Kmet was a pitcher for Notre Dame coming in his freshman year. It wasn't even a bad one. Got some good saves there as well. And when you're talking about that tight end position this year in the third round, it's all good value. You talk about Troutman as well because it's already depleted position as we sit here today. Everybody who doesn't need a tight end. If you have a tight end, you need a backup tight end. If you have a backup tight end, you need a third tight end because, again, that's what I love about that position too, Matt, is getting a guy like Cole Kmet in the third round. If he does pan out, that's always the good. Like if you have more than two tight ends and you're trying to make a deal and make a trade in Dynasty, if you have a startable tight end and you can just throw him in there, that's always going to tip that trade. Like, okay, I'll make the trade because I need a tight end. Like,
and way more than a third round draft pick ever would. You know what I mean? Like you can't give a third round draft pick in a deal and have it tip the scales all that much, but you can a developed tight end if you've had him for a couple of years.
Absolutely. And look at Mike Gesicki today. You know, you try and give Mike Gesicki away last year, and people were like, dude, I'd rather have a nice, delicious sandwich. But today, you're like, yeah, let me get some of those Gesicki upside shares. Garrett, give me a guy in the third who's not a turd.
I'm going back to the Gase which seems really, really dumb on the surface. But I'm going to go with LaMichael Pirine. He was a player that did everything fairly well. He wasn't overly impressive in any particular area, but the thing I was impressed with the most was he was a good receiving back, good hands. They even split him out at times. Pretty good between the tackles, good contact balance. He also got taken in the fourth round of the NFL draft. But what we know about Gase is he doesn't like Le'Veon Bell that much. He actually came out today and said, we would like to give him a breather at times. So that tells me that they just don't like Bell. But it also tells me the guy that would more than likely go in there in his place would be LaMichael Pirine. And we never know what could happen after the season. He could easily, Le'Veon Bell could easily be on another team. But we'll see. I don't know that he has long-term value, but I think in the short term, he could end up being one of those, fringe RB2 guys that could help get your team over the hump while you're waiting on another running back. Yeah,
two players in the NFL today that their teams have made very clear that they don't like them, and they're both running backs, Leonard Fournette and Le'Veon Bell. I think, could you put out more information coming out of these two teams saying, yeah, we just don't like them? Like, Gase, can you elaborate on what you mean by giving Le'Veon Bell a breather? It's like, I hope I can give him a breather by pushing his ass out the door is what I'm hoping, because I don't like him, all right? So my third round guy here is going to be Devin Duvernay for the Baltimore Ravens. They have Marquise Brown, big burner, lightning kind of guy. I don't think he's really somebody you could rely on in the fantasy game over as much. I like Miles Boykin out of Notre Dame going there, but Duvernay to me, when you got all those people comping Leviticus Chennault to Deebo Samuel, it drove me crazy. It absolutely did, because I thought Deebo Samuel and Leviticus Chennault were night and day when it comes to that kind of player and their skill sets. But Devin Duvernay is somebody I can get behind if you want to give that Deebo Samuel comp to. And with the way that Baltimore is building that offense to be short and fast in that offense, Duvernay brings that to the table. He could be that guy that will go across the middle out of the slot for Lamar Jackson and kind of offset Mark Andrews there in the middle. And you get the ball in his hands, he could be pretty electric there for the Baltimore Ravens. I like what they're doing with this offense. I love them bringing J.K. Dobbins in as well. I think this is going to be a fast, sustained offense for years to come. And they have a really good core now with J.K. Dobbins, Mark Andrews, Lamar Jackson, Marquise Brown, and then Devin Duvernay. And then you have Miles Boykin as a big guy on the outside. Somebody who's going in the back end of the third, possibly in the fourth round, that offers some good upside, who's really good and physical with the ball in his hands. If you like what Leviticus does with the ball in his hands, if you like what Deebo Samuel does with the ball in his hands, there's no reason not to like Devin Duvernay. And again, you're going to take Leviticus Chennault, high end, middle of the second round, and you get Devin Duvernay here at the back end of the third, top of the fourth. Good value in my eyes. So that's it. That's some good rookie value that we see in this 2020 class. That's really deep. Danny Kelly, thanks for joining us today. Tell our viewers where they can find you and your work.
You can find my work at ringer.com. I finished up the Ringer NFL Draft Guide, top 100 players, so go ahead and check that out at the Ringer. And the Dynasty Football Podcast, we're coming at you weekly right now, but we'll be ramping that up soon when we get a little closer to the fantasy season. So, yeah.
That's it. You guys got to check them out. The more information that you have when it comes to rookies, the better position you're going to be to dominate your draft. And a draft this deep, you need all the information you could possibly get. Danny's got you covered at the Ringer. We've got you covered at dynasty+nerds.com. Make sure you check out the Dynasty Nerds podcast. Check out all our rookie content there. Join the Nerd Herd. Make sure you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, because we have more information coming to you to help you win those chips. Thanks for viewing.